Now the second 12-year period, from ages 13 till about 25. This was an interesting period of my life. On the outside, everything was pretty normal from ages 13 through age 20. I went to middle school, although that was quite hair-raising on occasion. I went to 3 different middle schools. We moved in the middle, and then there was a new school for my 9th grade, my last year of middle school. I don't remember too much about middle school. Certainly it's a time that hormones kick in and girls start to be interesting. And so the simple idea of just being a sports star and that's good enough, well, that dream went by the wayside. And of course I got into the complexity of teenage life. After middle school, I went to Ingram High School and was a good student there. Was a student athlete, was the captain of the basketball team. My father's dear friend, Walt Milwright, was a very honored basketball coach, high school basketball coach. At one point had the most wins of any high school basketball coach in all of Seattle. Well, he was midway through his career as I was going to Ingram, and I was the captain of the basketball team my senior year. I played on the high school baseball team. My junior year, our team won the city championship. I wasn't really that good in high school baseball. By then, my size was a definite disadvantage. My best friend in high school was the best athlete in the city, Gary Lee. He led the Metro League in hitting and home runs in baseball, and he was second in the entire Metro League in scoring in basketball. Gary Lee was an incredible athlete, and he was my best friend for up to age 19. After I got into high school, that's when Gary Lee and I met each other, and he was insane. He was brilliant, and he was insane. So I'm not going to go into too many Gary Lee stories, but my sidekick, my best high school friend, was this brilliant young man who also was not to be trusted. A few Gary Lee stories will come later. From 13 to 15, as I say, I don't really remember too much. Certainly, I remember the schools I went to and the sports teams I played on, and some of the schoolwork. I don't remember much of that. I'd just say it just passed by. My younger sister, my middle sister Gail, when she was 13, rebelled against just the middle class life and became kind of aroused about for about a year. You know, I was not that. I was a good student, and so was my younger sister Diane. And then Gail, of course, turned into a really good girl in terms of following the rules a couple of years later, and she has throughout her life. Myself, I followed the rules right on through till when I was about 21, maybe 20. So I was in that conservative 60s atmosphere, and I loved high school. I bought into the whole scene of it. I was a handsome young lad, had girlfriends and good grades, and was doing what appeared to be the right thing. And so I didn't know any better. I felt like there was lots missing. I felt like I didn't have an understanding at all of what was going on, why it was going on, and who I really was. And I had bought into the brainwashing of the society. And so I came up in the 60s. It was kind of dark back in the 60s as far as consciousness. The gurus from India hadn't come. The concepts of spirituality were pretty thick with dogmatism and really lack of aliveness. And then, of course, the materialistic world had taken over here in America, and so I grew up with that, and I was very much dreaming dreams of what all the normal kids of that time were dreaming. Watched a lot of TV, went to all the movies, listened to all the music. So I was just a regular suburban kid. Went to college at Washington State University my freshman year. Gary Lee was my roommate. And partway through that first semester, Gary Lee had a horrible car accident and came back with, he had 300 stitches around his face and neck and shoulder. And it scared me a lot. Gary was acting out his craziness before that. So after my first semester, my father bailed me out and found another semester school. There was only 2 semester schools in the state of Washington, and the other semester school was in Tacoma. And so for my second semester, my freshman year, I went to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma. It was expensive, but it was a way to get out of Pullman, which I didn't like it there at all. Once at University of Puget Sound, very small school, I played on the golf team as a freshman. That was just a kind of a surprise that came out just because it was such a small school. I did fine there. I then came back to Seattle and went to the University of Washington as a sophomore and a junior. My high school sweetheart, Ann Fulcher, and I got together, and we lived together and were students at the University of Washington together, and it was a really good relationship that we had. I married her within a couple of years, and Ann and I went on the journey together through our junior year of college, where we were kind of just regular students, into dropouts, hippie dropouts. The reason I was a hippie dropout was I got a high draft lottery number for the Vietnam War, and so instead of having to go to school to not be drafted, I knew my draft lottery number was high enough where I wouldn't be drafted, and so I didn't have to go to school. So I decided to drop out and see what was going on in the hippie realm. And so Ann and I dropped out, and we became hippies together. We smoked a lot of marijuana and read whatever we wanted to, listened to a lot of rock and roll. And it was, I was trying to just see what really was drawing me, because I recognized in the whole hippie rebellion that was going on, what a bunch of lies the society had pushed upon us. And so all these racist, white elitist rules that were coming through the society were just, I had been completely duped by it all. And the hippies said no to it all. This was a real revolution. It was a revolution against the establishment. The establishment was stuck in their ways. And the hippies said, we aren't doing it that way. We are going to find a new way. And so I rode that wave, that hippie wave, and it was quite a wave. It was very powerful. Ann and I met, well, we started practicing yoga through the experimental college. And that was good, we liked it. In fact, I felt like maybe 22, I felt like, or 21 when I started, oh, this is it. This is finally it. Or after leaving high school and then going into college and being an athlete for all my life, being a well-trained athlete all my life, after 3 years of not being in athletics at all, I was really out of shape and I felt terrible, physically terrible. And I never really had raised my consciousness to the point of where I felt comfortable inside my skin. So I had a lot of angst about me, even though I had always done the right thing. And so this dropping out was an opportunity to really open up to who I truly was. And the growing family was a group of hippie kind of people who were a little bit older, and so they had more wisdom to them than just smoking dope and listening to rock and roll. And in fact, the growing family people brought many of the gurus from India right on through Seattle, and they'd stay at the growing family house. And these gurus, such as Swami Satchidananda, Yogi Bhajan, Swami Muktananda, Turbulent Khan, and many others came through, and then I was swept into this. So the counterculture of the hippie rebellion turned into this depth of consciousness that the growing family was bringing forward in terms of bringing the teachings of the East into the West, into Seattle, right? Into life here in the Wallingford area of Seattle. So Ed and I became deeply involved with the growing family, and this was quite a far out group.
I'd like to do a side story about my sisters Gail and Diane and what happened in their life between ages 14 to 20 in each of their cases. My first part of my offering, athletics, was such a big part of my dreams, and then those athletic dreams just lost their drive in the midst of life for me. Obviously I was not going to be a professional athlete, so I continued to love athletics, but the dreams were turning elsewhere, and I wasn't sure where they were turning really. But my sisters, Gail and Diane, on the other hand, stuck with synchronized swimming. And so here is the side story of what they did with their life at the tender ages of 14 through 20. So while I was in middle school and high school and just doing my best to develop my ego and survive, Gail and Diane were doing something quite exceptional that was so underneath the radar that really hardly anyone knew much about it. But they joined the Washington Athletic Synchronized Swimming team when I believe they were probably 13 and 14 years old. Seattle had never had anything to do with winning anything. But Charlotte Jennings and Gail and Diane practiced and became very good swimmers and brought forward that team into the national forefront in a surprising manner. Gail and Diane were partners and won the regional championships of synchronized swimming. They were probably 15 and 16. And then Charlotte Jennings and Diane teamed up to win the National Junior Synchronized Swimming Duet Championship when Diane was 16 and Charlotte was 17. It was a phenomenal victory. They came out of nowhere. No one knew who these two were, and the powerhouses had their great duet teams from Santa Clara Aquamaids and the San Francisco Marionettes. And Diane and Charlotte stunned the synchronized swimming world. And then they continued to practice and swim at the Washington Athletic Club. And then the three of them went down to Santa Clara to join the Santa Clara Aquamaids and helped to make the Santa Clara Aquamaids the world champions. And Diane and Charlotte were, well, they would have won gold medals that year, and the team would have won gold medal if it had been in the Olympics, but it wasn't. And so my sisters came back after that incredible year in Santa Clara, where they traveled the world. They were dedicated to 4 to 6 hours of practice a day. They were prime athletes. While they were at the Washington Athletic Club, a couple hours a day was pretty common throughout much of the year. So they had kept their athleticism going right on through, and more than I had, because I had become kind of lost in, I guess I just wasn't excelling in athletics enough to be able to take it any further. And here were Gail and Diane taking it further. You know, out of that, they began coaching. They have taken, in particular, Charlotte Jennings, and then she was married, Davis, or her name Charlotte Jennings Davis, and Gail and Diane taught the first Olympic champions, Tracy Ruiz and Candy Costi. But it was Charlotte who really was their coaches and brought them to the Olympic Games, and they became the Olympic champions. And the whole sport has been uplifted by Charlotte. Charlotte has become the greatest coach and spokesperson for synchronized swimming. She was elected into the International Swimming Hall of Fame for her lifetime of work. My sisters, Gail, Diane, and Charlotte, are to be honored for how they helped to evolve the sport of synchronized swimming. And now I'll move on to my story.
The involvement with the growing family led me to an involvement with the first yoga teacher, Monty West, and he was beyond out there. He was crazy. So from Monty, Ann and I started, free love was happening. We started accepting other partners, and it was Ann's first initiative to do that. And so, of course, starting to share partners and having numerous lovers, that's not too good for the marriage. And so Ann and I split away from each other. I went off on my own, actually moved back to my parents for a few months. Lived at my parents for the first part of that, and then moved to a small apartment on Queen Anne Hill to be close to my yoga teacher, who became my yoga teacher for many years, Marie Svoboda. And I was dropped out. I had no job, and I just practiced yoga and meditation all the time, along with taking a fair amount of LSD and smoking lots of ganja. I practiced 6 to 8 hours of yoga every single day, sometimes more on an acid trip. So I was so out there that my mother and father were hoping and praying that I didn't go completely mad. I was not so far from going completely mad. However, there was a part of me that was always tapped into the truth. And so one of my greatest moves was to leave relationships with young women for a while. I was celibate for 5 years from age 23 to 28. So in leaving relationships, I was free to explore life as I needed to explore it, and I was so far out there that I needed to explore it in my own way. And I did. I was very disciplined in spite of going about sort of the left-handed path.
To give you a few true stories of the ways I was way out there, between ages of 22 and a half to 23 and a half, something like that, I ate nothing but fruit. So I had read of yogis who were living on next to nothing, and one of the diets was fruit. So I gave it a try. And I went from about 140 pounds, 135 pounds, something like that, to 115 pounds or even less. It was difficult. It was a discipline for me. And during this process, I was practicing yoga vehemently every single day. And the fruit was, it was fasting to, I really wanted to experience God. And I was not going to stop until I did. And the fruit fasting was one way I showed that. Having, becoming celibate for between 23 to 28, this was a very good move on my part. I see, after Anne, I had had many other partners, and it was such a confusing time in my life that I just wanted to practice yoga, and I knew that having a relationship while I was only wanting to practice yoga was not fair to the relationship. So I had a relationship with yoga, the practice of yoga, and the job was to unfold my consciousness, and I was not going to get entangled in relationship issues until I really unfolded my consciousness. The unfoldment of my consciousness was a challenging task. Of course, I'm still in that process at age 67. But at age 23, I was still taking a fair amount of LSD until the end of that became a very, very, very scary acid trip in which I went through all the Tibetan bardo states of death, and it was kind of a long, slow process of I was dying, and I went unconscious for a little while and then woke up and was so grateful to be alive. But that ended my LSD days, and not so long thereafter the marijuana stopped. It was because of Marie.
Marie Svoboda was the woman who saved me through this. Marie was my Hatha yoga teacher and my meditation teacher. I studied with her from approximately age 22 through till many years later. And she was brilliant. She was an incredible human being, very grounded, and brought me through my drive, my desire to find God, even if it was going to be the death of me. And certainly always drive into fasting and nothing but fruit and huge amounts of acid and a few other substances, peyote, not the white powders or anything. It was part of the hippie thing. It was all happening then, and so the rock festivals and it's all the hippies were. It was a part of the scene, and so I just took it one step further and kind of dropped out of that hippie scene and into my own. It was kind of an ashram for me. I was just practicing yoga all day long, and I would show up at Marie's class and sometimes be so ridiculously stoned that I could barely function. She guided me through it, and she loved me, and she demanded that I come through this straight, that I start to see with clear eyes. And so she talked me into going back to college, and so that pretty much closed out my 13 to 25-year-old period. I was stopped taking acid, stopped smoking ganja, and began drinking huge amounts of coffee as a replacement. And then went back to college to finish out what I had started. You know, the inside story of ages 13 to 25, I don't have much of an inside story from ages 13 to 20 because I was just brainwashed by the prevailing society. I was doing what I was supposed to do, and I was doing it well. I was getting good grades, and I was with a nice, beautiful young woman. So I just bought into it, and it was really unsatisfying, and yet I didn't even know that until around about age 21. There was a deep scrutiny happening. The Vietnam War was obviously a terrible war, and the protests against that were extreme. I was very involved with that. The racism that pervaded through America and was brought forward in the mid-60s. I was a part of that, and a strong statement against racism. But there wasn't too far I could go in that, and so I was white. But where I did go was into the gurus who came to America. Now, my first guru, and so the inside story is really this consciousness awakening of a young man who had no training and my father and mother had no desire for me to be a yoga teacher. It just looked like it was just some far out thing. So I started reading Be Here Now by Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, and this began my journey into saying, the hell with what it appeared to be. I'm going to find out what it is through my internal experience. And that's what I did. I dropped out. and I tuned in. This was a delicate playing field I was on, the field of complete rebellion against everything I'd been told and taught. Toss it out the window, it's all lies, it's all a pack of lies. And then to bring forward something new and magnificent that was true and real. Well, this was a process. The letting go was actually quite easy. It was kind of the story of me becoming a vegetarian tells the story of how easy it was to let it go. So my father had drilled into me that I needed to eat a lot of meat, and I did eat a lot of meat in growing up. And then all of a sudden, the hippies were saying, hey, this meat's not so good for you. I became a vegetarian, and overnight, I just made that transfer. It was so easy. It was so simple. And in a way, the dropping out was just that for me too. It was so easy to drop out because I was so completely fed up with the lies and so in need of a ringing truth inside that wasn't just some outside form that I was supposed to follow. So the inside story is, well, it's a lot of LSD and a lot of jarring from being jolted by LSD experiences and then trying to assess what went on after one of these numerous experiences, and then reading the Eastern philosophy, reading yoga, first reading Ram Dass, and then being initiated by Pure Vilayat Inayat Khan, the great Sufi master, and being trained in meditation by this great Sufi master, Pure Vilayat Inayat Khan. Now, I didn't see him too much because he would just come through Seattle once or twice a year. I saw Marie almost daily from about ages 22 to 26. And so she was my, she was like my mom and my teacher. My parents somehow accepted me just as I was. They were just scared that I was going to just flip out. They had good right to be scared. My mother and father were really good to me from 22 to 26, even though it appeared like I really was going really nowhere. They had a trust in me, and they continued to trust me. And certainly I have landed on my feet. The landing on the feet took a while. So this time period of 22 to 25, the stories that I have are almost so far out that I've never told them. The inner story is that I had my own way to evolve, and I had to overcome a lot of thick programming. And I did through radical means.
The radical means that I used was fasting, and the path of yoga, and the path of meditation, and turning my back to old ways of being so I could find myself anew. And so I stand here now, thankful for having push through every single effort to find out what I needed to find in my life in my own way, in my own timing. Namaste.